Building back better, Yatani's 7-point to bolster economic growth. Why does it matter to you? Good evening. Thank you so very much indeed. Welcome to the most comprehensive coverage of the 2021-2022 budget. My name is O'Brien Kimani. We're going to break down the numbers for you, interpret the words, and help you make sense of everything right here on Inside Government. Our team of experts is in the house to help us with this assignment. But first, a look at the highlights.
Total expenditure in the financial year 2021-22 budget are projected at shilling 3.03 trillion, equivalent 24.5% of GDP, from shilling 2.89 trillion, equivalent 25.8% of GDP in the financial year 2020-21.
The 2021-2022 budget highlights. Government unveils 3.03 trillion fiscal plan under the theme Building Back Better. Losers and gainers. Online entrepreneurs to pay more taxes as local manufacturers are protected from cheap imports.
The budget has to be high because it's based on not only priorities but the scope of expenditure. And government is growing, the economy is growing.
And it's all for our good. National Treasury Cabinet Secretary Ukur Yatani defends increasing budget, saying it is to support a growing economy. And we are in the good company of Lucy Maura, our sign language interpreter. Welcome to the news. The government plans to spend 3.03 trillion shillings in the fiscal year 2021-2022 under the theme Building Back Better. According to National Treasury Cabinet Secretary Ukur Yatani, the target is premised on a projected gross domestic growth of 6%, driven by an economic recovery strategy and effective COVID-19 containment measures. Of these, Wanjiko is expected to cough up 1.7 trillion shillings, while government is to borrow 929 billion shillings to plug the deficit.
Mr. Speaker, total expenditure in the financial year 2021-22 budget are projected at shilling 3.03 trillion, equivalent 24.5% of GDP, from shilling 2.89 trillion, equivalent 25.8% of GDP in the financial year 2020-21.
Government intends to spend 3.03 trillion shillings in the financial year 2021-2022 budget, equivalent to 24.5% of gross domestic product, compared to the previous year's 2.89 trillion shillings, equivalent to 25.8% of GDP in the financial year 2020-2021. Total revenue is projected at 2.04 trillion shillings, equivalent to 16.4% of GDP, a nominal increase from 1.89 trillion shillings in the financial year 2020-2021. The taxman is charged with collecting 1.78 trillion shillings, equivalent to 14.3% of GDP. Recurrent expenditures will amount to 2 trillion or 16.2% of GDP.
Total revenue, including appropriation in aid and grants for the financial year 2021-22 budget, is projected at shilling 2.1 trillion. Equivalent to 17% of GDP. Of this, total revenue is projected at shilling 2.04 trillion, equivalent to 16% of GDP, an increase in nominal terms from shilling 1.84 trillion in the financial year 2020-21. Ordinary revenue in the budget is projected at shilling 1.78 trillion.
This funding is expected to accelerate completion of ongoing critical infrastructure projects in the country. The fiscal deficit for the financial year 2021-2022 budget is projected at 929.7 billion shillings, equivalent to 7.5% of GDP.
The fiscal deficit in 2021-22 budget will be financed through net external financing of Kenya shilling 271.2 billion, equivalent to 2.2% of GDP, and net domestic financing of Kenya shilling 658.5 billion, equivalent to 5.3% of GDP.
To further support the Kenya Revenue Authority meet its target, National Treasury Cabinet Secretary Ukur Yatani proposed several amendments to the income tax, among them expanding the scope of the digital tax service to include income derived from the internet and electronic devices.
The Finance Act 2020 introduced the digital service tax on income earned through the digital marketplace. However, the current tax provision do not cover all traders who use the digital service platform to transact their business. In this regard, I propose to expand the scope of the digital service tax to include income derived from internet and electronic networks.
With 2022 around the corner, the implementation of the Big Four agenda was prioritized as Treasury allocated 142.1 billion shillings for the Big Four agenda.
I have proposed an allocation of shilling 13.9 billion for the affordable housing program. The proposed allocation includes shilling 3.5 billion to Kenya Mortgage Refinance Company for establishment of the company's capital, as well as for own lending to primary mortgage lenders. Shilling 8.2 billion for construction of affordable housing units, as well as shilling 500 million for construction of social housing units.
Under affordable housing, Kenya Mortgage Financing Corporation is to issue a bond by October 2021 to finance construction of more affordable houses to spur uptake of mortgages. To further promote access to affordable credit by micro, small and medium enterprises, the government has committed to progressively raise the capital to 10 billion shillings and an additional 2 billion shillings to the scheme.
The execution of the budget for the financial year 2020-21 has progressed well, albeit with revenue underperformance and elevated expenditure associated with the adverse impact of COVID-19 pandemic.
Going forward, Treasury will be publishing a draft national tax policy framework meant to enhance the administrative efficiency of the tax system. Regina Manyara reporting for Channel 1 News.
It was a day of big words and gigantic numbers. And to help us break down these numbers and, of course, what they actually mean for you, we're joined in studio by Jim McPhee. He's a lecturer at Strathmore University. Dr. Thank you very much for having or finding time to be with us this evening.
Thank you for having me.
And Winnie Kimodo is the tax manager at PKF. Winnie, thank you very much indeed for your time. I want to start with you, Winnie. What do you make of this budget, these highlights by Ambassador Ukur Yatani?
Given that I'm a tax person, my first insights into the budget would be that we're looking forward to aligning our tax laws to what is international best practice. So if you look at more like the income tax proposals, they're all, aligned to what is the international best practice. So we're looking forward to introducing reporting regulations. We're looking forward to capping the interest so that we can ensure that there's no base erosion and of the tax base and profit shifting to other countries. So it's more like we're just aligning our interest to what is international best practice, just to ensure that we tax correctly in Kenya. That would be my take home. And also it's a budget that's looking more of incentivizing part of the local manufacturers in Kenya. To what extent it's yet to be seen because we are yet to feel the effects of it. But more like so, it's like we're trying to build back, as they're saying, but with more incentivization into the local sector through the tax measures that have been put forth, and more so with a focus to the health sector. Yes.
And, looking at taxation measures, I mean, do you feel there is a deliberate effort to try and broaden or widen the tax bracket?
Oh, yes, mostly for the digital economy. As you know, it's been a nightmare all over the world of how you're going to tax the digital economy. So, of course, there's a deliberate effort for us to tax the digital economy and to ensure that everyone is brought to the tax net and to pay their fair share of revenues. As well, if you look at it, we're also looking forward to taxing multinationals who are usually highly geared, because they invest a lot of debt, and to a certain extent, the interest is going to be deductible. So we are trying to limit just how much they're going to get out as part of their revenue in terms of the economic activities that they're going to conduct in Kenya by limiting the interest that they've actually earned. On another note is that for me, the general outlook of it is that it's also tending to go deeper other than broadening the tax base. Because if you look, we still want to tax the person who has been heavily taxed. We still want to tax more. Yeah, that would be my perspective.
We'll be coming back to that, to try to understand, how the government plans to, tax the taxed more. What about you, Jim?
Well, I always feel that when we talk about the tax base, we're always thinking about income tax. When I used to work in Ernst & Young many years ago, the top rate of income tax was 70% in Kenya. Now, why is it only 30% now? Well, one of the reasons is that we've got VAT. I think we've got to keep in mind that our rate of VAT is lower than that in Uganda. Ours is 16%, Uganda's 20%. So that's the first thing I think that we've got to keep in mind. But you've got to remember that Wanjiku, whenever she buys a bar of soap, whenever she buys some Omo, whenever she buys whatever it is, she is actually paying tax. So although we are all the time talking about broadening the tax base, in fact, this year VAT income is going to go from 395 billion to 473 billion, an increase of 20%. Now, what you're doing actually is you're broadening the tax base in that way. And okay, it's difficult for some, and I know that, we're struggling, the whole economy is struggling at the moment because of the COVID-19 business. But the fact is, I think we've got to understand, if we want, for example, roads, if we want schools, if we want hospitals, someone has got to pay for it. And it's either going to be this generation or the next generation. There's no such thing as a free lunch. So we've got to understand, okay, we're borrowing, and in fact, one of the biggest item in our budget at the moment is interest on government debt, which is 561 billion, okay? The biggest single item. The next item down is the amount that goes to the counties, which is about 410 billion. But I think it's important to keep in mind here that, people, on the one hand, we will say, well, this road, what's the state of the road, etc., etc., etc. But on the other hand, we then say, well, I'm paying too much tax. Actually, when you actually consider, and the chairman of the Institute of Certified Public Accountants made this point in Mombasa recently, that when you think of government expenditure in Kenya as a proportion of our nominal GDP, it's 16.4%. Whereas in other countries, for example, in Rwanda, it's 58%. So,
which is a smaller country than Kenya.
It's a smaller country, but, very much more is in government hands. So I think, we've got to have a very balanced view. The view at the moment is, we're too deeply in debt. We're just going to be, at the end of the year, we're going to be just under 70% of GDP. But, if we want roads, then we got to pay. And I think, we got to understand, we see the tax base really broadening through VAT. And, people will say, well, there's a whole lot of people in business, and the Juakali sector, you've got a lot of smaller people there. Smaller, but actually earning more than the salaried employees. And the income tax, you see, we're going to see an increase in GDP of 6%. But income tax is going up, as you were saying, by 14%. So this means that, I don't know whether you're going to get a salary increase. I don't think I am. I'm working on a part salary at the moment. But obviously the idea that the Treasury has is that, a lot of people are going to pay a lot more income tax, 14% more than last year. Admittedly, last year was a bit of a low year because, looking at the actual numbers there, it was only about 3.69% more than the preceding year. But, I think you've got to realize 14% increase in income tax. I think this supports what you were saying. The people who pay tax are actually going to be paying more.
No, it's proper that you have brought that issue out, and the 14% increase in income tax in a country where because of the COVID-19 pandemic, we have seen about more than 2 million people, losing their income because of job losses, especially in the tourism industry, in the real estate sector, and so much. Is this winking or trying to wink in dark?
I think that's a very good question because, we've always got to remember, it's rather like I read the other day that the Met have forecast that between the 8th of June and the 14th of June, we're going to have heavy rain. Now, I'm very interested in that because I love trees, I plant trees, and I want to get my trees watered without me running around with buckets and, but that's my exercise. This rain is not here. So, the point is, will we actually have an increase in our economy? You've got to remember that last year, 166 billion shillings was taken out of the economy because of our total close down of tourism. Now, we're not in control of that. The world is in control of, well, China actually is in control of that at the end of the day. That Wuhan laboratory. But anyway, the thing is that, we've lost that money. Now, I just hope and pray we can get back our tourism. And if that is the case, the hotel industry can start it reviving again. That's absolutely essential. So I would say let's try to contain COVID version 4 up in Kisumu and in Pole for the people up there. But I think it's very, very important that we try to control COVID so that we can get back our tourism. Because if we get back that, it's a very big employer of people. That will give us the possible increase in the income tax that you were rightly talking about.
And you're talking about, controlling, COVID-19, and this economic recovery strategy is highly benchmarked or hinged on, controlling COVID-19. We have seen about 14 billion shillings going towards, provision of more inoculation vaccines and. Providing more support to healthcare workers. But you want your economy to grow by 6.1% in 2021, 2022. And you're providing 14 billion shillings to help, safeguard this growth of about 3 trillion Kenya shillings. Is this realistic, honestly?
Actually, one of the things that I noted in the budget today was that allocation of 14 billion towards the vaccine. And the global outlook, how it is right now, the recovery, even for most countries, is going to be dependent on how they're going to tackle the pandemic going forward. And for economies that are going to vaccinate massively, then they have a higher chance of recovering more than economies that are not going to vaccinate massively. So then with an allocation of 14 billion shillings for vaccination against a mass population of 40 million, Kenyans, what does that mean for Kenya? Where does it put us in the global outlook and in the mapping of Kenya, in the mapping of the globe, I'm sorry. So essentially for me, I found it as an underestimation in terms of we really cannot vaccinate everyone with the 14 billion shillings. And as well, we are also marrying the way on which we are going to be recovering. And just to weigh in on what Dr. McPhee was talking about earlier on, we are projecting our growth in GDP by 2024 to grow by 7 trillion. From 11 trillion shillings to 17 trillion shillings. Yeah. So then the question begs, what are we going to do from now onwards up until 2024 for us to bridge in a gap of 7 trillion? Because we are saying by 2024, we should be collecting 3 trillion shillings in terms of our revenue. So then all of these growths that are projected, they must be underlined by proper provisions in the law. How do we enable the informal sector to spur? How do we enable the growth? And for me, from where I sit, we have to increase the purchasing power of the common mwananchi so that manufacturers can have people to go to sell their products to. But with the current taxation of those that are employed or those that have their current purchasing power, then of course we've been reducing the purchasing power. That's my sole opinion.
That is, yeah. Okay. And you're talking about, more than 500 billion shillings, going towards debt repayment.
That's interest on debt.
That is on the interest.
Yeah, that's only interest. So, in fact, that's 27.56% of our total revenue. 27% goes just to pay the interest on the debt. I always you see, a lot of people make well, we got debt service, but it's rather like let's suppose I buy a house using a mortgage, and let's suppose that, you know, I get just for the sake of ease, I've got a loan of 10 million shillings, let's say. Now, if I repay 1 million shillings of capital, that is part of my debt service. Now, I'll also have to pay interest on the 10 million shillings. So it may be, let's say, 12% or 14%, let's say, it's going to be 1.4 million shillings. Now, you could say, since I want to repay capital of 1 million shillings in my first year and pay the interest, I've got debt service of 2.4 million. But if I'm a common one-inchie, what I want to know is, look, first of all, how much interest do I pay? And then, how much capital do I pay? And it may be that she comes along and offers me a loan at 5% instead of 14%, so I repay the whole of that, and I actually take on more loans at 5%. So I think we've got to be very, very clear about this. We always talk about our debt service is so much and so much, and we've got to make a distinction between revenue expenditure, which is the interest, and then it may be that we can't, as David Indy recently, we're in a conversation together, and he said, look, in fact, countries don't actually repay their national debt. What they do is they just borrow more, and then, you know, it's a kind of shifting. And companies do this as well. I'm in a company where we're repaying debts and we're taking on new debts. So, you know, it's not as if that's totally unusual. But I think people cloud the issue. But mind you, we got to remember that interest on debt has gone up. It's scheduled to go up by 21% this year. And, you know, as you say, we are thinking of having a much bigger economy where in 2 years' time, in 3 years' time, we're going to have a revenue of over 3 trillion shillings, which is in fact going to be only 23% of our total GDP. So, you know, the thing is, it's going to go down. But you see, well, we've got to see ways by which we increase our income in Kenya. And, you know, one of the biggest problems is our more and more and more restrictive laws. You know, there's a thing now, if you want to be, is it an estate agent, you've got to have some kind of a license or be a member of some body. Now, soon, if you want to be a gardener, you've got to go and do an examination in gardening. And, you know, if you want to be a farmer,
to be a certified gardener.
You've got to be a certified gardener, and you know, etc. Now, we've got to stop this. Please, you politicians, forget about messing around with our government, you know, the laws regulating business. Let's have a freer economy. You know, in the United States, they're actually reducing the number of, you know,
so your concern, your concern is overregulation.
Overregulation.
But I still want to pose this question to Winnie. I mean, look, I mean, when you are talking about a budget of about 3-point-something trillion Kenya shillings, you know, where about 560 billion shillings will go towards interest on debt repayment, and then at the end of the day, you also have a budget deficit of about 7.1%. I mean, that is what you would call a double whammy.
I'll be honest with you, I'm not an economics person, but for a fact and for sure I know that the numbers are pegged on the stimulus programs that are meant to spur growth and the projections in GDP growth. But only problem I have with those projections is, are we really going to meet them? Nobody ever thought that in 2020 we are going to be grappling with the COVID-19 pandemic. Nobody ever knew the adverse effects that the COVID-19 pandemic was ever going to have on businesses, on our income that we are going to generate from those businesses. So in essence, when you look at our public debt, it was outweighed by because we had projections for 2020, but then again, it went up because of the pandemic. If you look at the GDP, it really didn't grow. We had a contraction. So then the question is, if we're planning to grow to 17 trillion by 2024, are we prepared for the hitches along the way for us to project the debt levels to go that high? So for me, I'm a little bit concerned about where we're projecting the growth, and are we realistic in the terms that we're living in, that something can just pop up? I'm not sure that we are prepared for that. And if I look at it from a macroeconomic perspective, the carrier is really trying to bring in more revenue, because if you look at this year, they have a target of collecting 2 trillion. But really, where are they going to get the 2 trillion? I can tell you for a fact and for sure, the measures that they have put in place includes in-depth audit. And if you look at one of the proposals in this year's finance bill, they want to audit as far much back as 7 years, as opposed to the 5 years that they're currently auditing. Why? Because they have one sole goal, which is to obtain more revenues over the last 7 years. And again, if you look at the budget policy statement, the carrier as well is targeting high net worth individuals, people who are moving a lot of money, purchasing land and what have you, and cross-country transactions, because they want to net those people and bring them to the tax net. So those are some of the measures that are already there, but they are looking more forward towards compliance. But then again, I want to throw this question to Dr. McPhee. Have we really utilized the big data analytics that we have, the use of the iTrack system and other systems that we have for us to spark growth in the first place, to come up with the right policies that are going to create an enabling environment for us to achieve the revenue growth that we intend to have in 2024. And I highly doubt
McPhee is going to answer that question.
No.
Are you well versed with big data and blockchain technology?
No, the point here is we can talk about all of that, but I think the most important thing is, look, I know 3 businesses which were going to start in Kenya, which didn't start because a very senior politician in Kenya said, look, you give me 20%. That man is destroying Kenya.
20% of what?
20%. I want 20% share of this company without me paying anything. That man is destroying Kenya.
Did you report that to police?
No, because this man is too powerful for me to do this. I know a contractor who went to one of the counties in Kenya. He said, look, I'm going to put low-cost housing in this county. He said, you start by paying me 1 million shillings. He just walked out the door. Now, this is destroying Kenya. I am educating accountants who can't get a job. Why? Because we're not growing our businesses. And we go back to the point that you're making. How are we going to get a GDP going from 11 trillion to 17 trillion unless we create new businesses here? We talk about an environment which is enabling. It enables the few people who are drinking la matunda, and the point is, we've got to change that. We are going the way of Venezuela. Venezuela used to be the richest country in South America. It's now the poorest. Why? Because of the president of that country and his buddies. So we got to understand how serious the future of this country is, because I am worried. My students, it used to be you come out of my qualification and you get a job immediately, because accountants are employed right across the economy. But the point is, if the economy in terms of demand for personnel is shrinking, we have youth unemployment. So this is, we've got to understand. We got to understand the seriousness of this. If we don't, we are helping Kenya to die.
But it's also good to remember that, even as you talk about Venezuela, we also have to look at, issues around, trade embargoes and, restrictions imposed on the economy by the United States, which has somehow contributed, to the total collapse of to the almost total collapse of the Venezuelan economy. But let me also get to hear your thoughts on these. You're planning to grow this economy to about 17 trillion shillings economy in about 3-4 years' time from now. The CS is talking about reducing the fiscal deficit to around 3.4% of GDP. How do you do these? Number one, by not taxing people more, and number two, by at the same time expanding the tax base?
Well, if the economy grows, if you take 20% of a bigger economy, obviously you have more income. And this is the whole idea of the public debt. If we have borrowed and that debt brings in additional income, because Kenya is a more attractive destination to visit, we get more jobs in Kenya. We have to remember that we're surrounded by very, very competitive countries, very competitive. The biggest airline in Africa is Ethiopian. We are the 4th biggest. So we have a lot of competition. They're going to build a dam. They're going to be exporting electricity to Kenya. So, in fact, last month, more cargo went to Uganda through Dar es Salaam than through Mombasa. So we live in a competitive environment. So we've got to compete. We've got to be like Eliud Kipchoge. What is he doing every day these days? He's just watching TV, is he? Or traveling around the country in his helicopter? No, he's out there training. And that's why he's going to win his next race. So we've got to understand this. All of us have got to build Kenya together. And if we do that, we will come to the 17 trillion that we're talking about. But if we start stealing, stealing turns people away. And the point here really is we can grow the economy like this, but all of us have got to be honest. All of us. And we got to lead by example, not by maneno. Watch your maneno, get action. And that, in fact, will transform Kenya. Eliud Kipchoge is the one who gives us example here. That man is a hero. He's a humble man. He doesn't want to, he gets a prize in France. He receives it here on a Zoom meeting. His trainer is in France, but he's here. Why? Because he doesn't want to waste money going to France.
I think you have a special place for Kipchoge, which is good. I mean, there's no trouble with that. But let's get back to the topic and the issue at hand here. Do you think it's possible to reduce the fiscal deficit from 7.5% now to around 3.4% in 3 years' time?
The question is yes or no, depending on how you look at. The answer is yes or no, depending on where you choose to look at it from. From a tax perspective, I highly doubt, and I'm going to give the reasons as to why I highly doubt. If you look at the last 5 years, the taxation of this country has been uncertain. And that is one of the things that Ukuri Atani, the CS today, Honorable CS, was looking forward to address, including coming up with a national policy for taxation matters to ensure that there is certainty in businesses. Because there's no way you're going to come into Kenya as an investor and you're expecting to make an investment of 200 million shillings, and you knew for a fact and for sure you are going to get 150% investment deduction when you invest outside Nairobi and Mombasa. But then again, in the next coming year, actually in 2020, the policy changes and you cannot actually enjoy that deduction. So what does that mean? I brought my 1 billion. I did not actually get the relief that I wanted in that year, and hence and therefore I'm starting to count losses. And you can imagine at that time I knew I could actually utilize it and have it as part of my losses. But now even when I'm a loss-making entity, I am being forced to pay 1% minimum tax, albeit I know it has been suspended by the High Court. But look at the uncertainty that you are creating in this business environment. We are actually punishing people who are coming to invest even by taxing them even when they are in a loss position. And if you look at one of the proposals in the current finance bill, they're actually saying now there's a proposal that anyone can carry their losses into perpetuity because they're thinking this is just a leaning on shoulder if the minimum tax provision is ruled in their favor. And if it's not ruled to their favor, then for a fact and for sure we know that you're going to revert to the whole idea of limiting the taxability of losses to the 9 years. So ideally for me, if you ask me where we stand right now, it's highly dependent on the policies that you are going to create and even the environment that you're going to create for businesses. And currently what you've seen over the last 5 years, we are most likely going to be on a decline for revenue collection simply because we are creating an environment of uncertainties. Hence, we are not even attracting any investors coming to Kenya. And like McPhee was saying, if you look at Ethiopia, Tanzania, the question is, why are they attracting more investors? Why is Uganda looking forward in Rwanda to having more businesses together with Tanzania as opposed to Kenya? It's simply because of the structures that we have in Kenya, a structure that is demolishing this country other than promoting businesses. So for me, from where I stand, it is achievable if we have the right, the right structures in place. We ensure that there is full utilization of the resources without wastage, without corruption, and we mute corruption totally, and then we can for sure bridge the deficit. But things look like currently, I do not see it.
Jim, from where you see it, the CS is talking about GDP growth of about 6.1% in the year 2021 from 0.3% in the year 2020. Is this realistic when you look at the environment?
I'll tell you why. What you find, for example, right at the moment, the UK has got the biggest growth that it's ever had for a number of years. Why? Because you've got to remember, you see, when you actually have an almost total collapse of the economy, what happens is it's easy to grow from that total collapse to a much bigger position, providing, as you mentioned, we go back to our normal, as it were. We don't have to worry about COVID-19. This is the big thing that we have to try to keep in check. And, you know, I think it's always important to keep in mind, you know, that, again, the strain which is present in India at the moment is affecting children and so on. But by and large, young people are very resistant to COVID-19. So you've got to remember that half of our population is under the age of 17. So now it means really that, you know, and then also, for example, if you take people who are out in the countryside, and 75% of Kenyans live in the countryside, what we've got to do is we've got to actually look after the 25% who live in the towns, in the Kiberas, the Mathari Valley, Korogosho, etc., etc. So if we are able to get those people vaccinated so that they're not going to spread it in the towns, I think we've got COVID beaten. That's what I feel anyway.
That's what you
feel. And also, we've got to, you know, keep our masks on. And, you know, I'm giving you a very good example by, I have an invisible mask at the moment, you see, you don't see it. But the thing is that, you know, I think we've got to carry out all the precautions necessary, you know, almost religiously, so that we make sure that we get control of this disease. If we do that, to my mind, that 6% that we're talking about is absolutely doable. You know, as has happened in other countries, okay?
Yeah.
It's happened. The only problem, the big problem here is oil is now $72, so almost $73 a barrel. A year ago, oil was $40 a barrel. So this is, you see, the problem is also when the price was very low, the government put in a few more taxes, and that is now though it's come back to bite us now. So the price of oil, of petrol is going to go even further up, and that is going to affect the cost of living. It may be that, you know, the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, you know, engineers are numbered downwards, but I think it is going to be a case where...
That's one you cannot prove at this point. I'm not going to give you a platform to throw such allegations. Anyway, in the interest of time, I mean, we've been talking about this for almost 30 minutes now. We have to bring it to a close, and I'm giving each one of you 30 seconds to give Kenyans hope. I mean, we've had so much that is breaking our hearts. Time now for hope. Winnie.
I laughed because there's a lot of hope. We Kenyans are a resilient economy. We haven't been ravaged by COVID-19. What's that? I mean, if we have survived COVID-19 to that level, what is that? For me, it doesn't look as if it's much to worry us. However, what I'm going to tell Kenyans is that we have to stay true to our patriotism. We have to keep paying our taxes for economy to grow, but on the other side, we also have to demand for accountability for us to see the worth of our taxes. That's the parting shot for me.
Thank you so much, Winnie.
Whatever she says, I agree, unless she changes her mind, in fact. So, no, but I think, you know, as you say, you know, Kenyans are resilient people. But I think it's very, very important that we understand, look, you know, if we can just make our country an honest country, I tell you, the sky is the limit. The sky is the limit. Not only Kipchoge will fly the flag of Kenya everywhere, we will be able to fly the flag of Kenya everywhere. We ourselves, I have past students, some past students have been voted the best employees in their companies in the United States. Kenyans can do things, but if we be honest, we will really go places.
Very well. People, thank you so very much indeed for your input, your insight, and of course for your thoughts. We look forward for a better, brighter future for this country.
Great.
Yeah, thank you.
Very good.
Indeed.
Why don't you have a good night?
Thank you.
And keep safe.
Thank you.
Very good. Winnie Kimodo is a tax manager at PKF, while Jim McPhee is a lecturer at Strathmore University joining us tonight to help us understand more about the budget highlights. As presented by Ambassador Ukur Yatani, the CS for National Treasury and Planning. Let's move on. Well, the government has attributed the increasing budget expenditure now at 3.66 trillion shillings to the country's scope of expenses to support a growing economy. National Treasury Cabinet Secretary Ambassador Ukur Yatani says a higher budget has a positive impact on economic growth, which translates to benefits such as creation of jobs, as explained by Kamcha Menza.
There have been concerns that Kenya was living outside its means by unveiling higher budget estimates each year. Critics have attributed this to the ballooning public debt. However, National Treasury Cabinet Secretary Ukur Yatani has indicated that increased budget was inevitable.
You know, you couldn't expect more. The budget has to be high because it's based on not only priorities, but the scope of expenditure. And government is growing, the economy is growing.
Yatani says the higher budget will positively impact on the economic growth, which is centered on investments and expenditures.
And when we expand an investment in the economy, we are likely to realize the intended benefits as a result of creating more jobs and opportunities for our people.
The economic impact COVID-19 pandemic has had on individuals, he says, also needs to be addressed.
Constrained expenditure, if you are not spending, therefore that multiplier effect will not be felt at all. That's why in this COVID season, given the challenges of the business environment, we believe that government should continue spending more so that it can create that required multiplier effect to the economy.
And with institutions and county governments having been given an ultimatum of 20 days to clear all pending bills, the National Treasury CS says it may not be well with devolved units who fail to pay suppliers in time, since such payment delays affects the economy.
In the process, some of them who borrowed money from banks go into challenges of repayment. Some of them, the business are auctioned, they get run into those troubles. That's why we are very keen, and we want to ensure that we maximize on the gains of the policy that we have undertaken.
To that effect, the National Treasury plans to amend the Public Finance Management Act to penalize defaulters.
Flow of funds, including the disbursement to those counties that persistently refuse to pay without any justifiable reason, be provided so that Treasury can suspend some of those disbursements until a clear roadmap and framework are provided in making them comply in payment of pending bills.
Already a new audit exercise for the counties has been commissioned to verify pending bills before governors are tasked to give a roadmap on how the dues will be settled. With the issue of pending bills remaining one of the biggest nightmares facing county governments, Treasury now says that it may not be business as usual, as it plans to ensure that those who fail to pay are held responsible. Kamcha Menza for Channel 1 News, Nairobi.
Bwana Motiso, pikipiki yako ndio hii. Uko shoni yangu. Hii pikipiki ni unakumbuka uniekelea the lowest unique bid yako ilikuwa ngapi? 18 shillings. Na unajua kuendesha hii gari? Kidogo. Haya, kitoko yako shika helmet, kifungu yako chomoka na mali yako.
Kujiunga na QuickBid ni rahisi. Enda kwenye M-Pesa, bonyeza paybill, kisha weka business number 4032353. Kwenye account, weka kodi ya bidhaa unayotaka na bid yako ya chini zaidi. Kwa mfano, TV 16. Kisha weka shilingi 20 tu kama idadi yako. Weka bid yako pia kwenye www.quickbid.co.ke. Kumbuka, bid ya chini zaidi ya kipekee ndio hununua. QuickBid, bidhaa bora kwa bei ya chini.
Tunakupa burudani. na umbea, yani stories zinazo trend kwenye mitandao ya kijamii.
See baby, now we are two in one. We are two in one.
Interview kali za wasanii wapendao.
Mguu pande panda milima, izungushie hapo kama una
Ndani ya March of Life kupitia KBC Channel 1 na Pwani FM.
Kuanzia mida ya saa 3 mpaka mida ya 5 kamili asubuhi. Ukiwa nami ni Teken 1GB.
Mimi ni Marco. Keep it locked.
Malewa.
Next on.
Mara ya mwisho yuko na Nancy Likoen.
I know they'll be coming for me soon.
Sichukue ndege moja uende South Africa ukajifishage huko.
I have built too much here in Kenya to just walk away.
Kusikiliza King Tiffany walikuwa na piana na Eriko hapa nje nikasido.
Nani alikuwa amekutuma?
Wayuni kuongea ukweli tu ukweli. Sasa nani alikuwa amekutuma? Wewe. Mlikuwa mnapiana nini?
Na nani?
Sina Tiffany.
Mbona?
Nataka nijue kama ndiko kasi.
Kama you can leave, I'm sure Wayuni will fill you in.
Oh.
Maji mimi hata niliashaga obea na udaku. Siku hizi mimi nikiongeleshwa na mtu kitu inaisiaga hapo hapo.
Did you know that the policy document is evidence of the existence of an insurance contract between you and your insurance company? It is important to know the terms and conditions of your insurance policy. Make sure you obtain, read, and understand the terms and conditions of the policy document. Now you know. IRA, promoting insurance, protecting the insured.
Welcome back. You're watching the most comprehensive budget coverage on the land. My name is O'Brien. Well, the government has set aside 14.3 billion shillings in the financial year 2021-2022 to facilitate a further rollout of the COVID-19 vaccine. In the 3.66 trillion shillings budget presented by National Treasury Cabinet Secretary Ukur Yatani, the government has allocated 8.7 billion shillings to the COVID-19 emergency response project and introduced value-added tax exemptions on various pharmaceutical products and medical equipment.
With over 1 million Kenyans having received the first dose of COVID-19 vaccine by end of May 2021, the government is planning to spend 14.3 billion shillings in the financial year 2021-2022 for the purchase and rollout of the COVID-19 vaccines.
In order to facilitate further rollout of vaccines to create herd immunity, we propose to allocate Kenya shilling 14.3 billion in the financial 2021-22. This is in addition to Kenya shilling 7.6 billion appropriated in the current budget.
According to National Treasury Cabinet Secretary Ukur Yatani, out of the whopping 121.1 billion shillings allocated to improve health services across the country, 8.7 billion shillings will go to the COVID-19 emergency response project.
The outbreak and rapid spread of the COVID-19 pandemic necessitated an urgent need to upscale implementation of universal health coverage to all our counties. Towards this end, Mr. Speaker, I have proposed an allocation of Kenya shilling 121.1 billion to the health sector to support the various programs aimed at improving health outcomes. Mr. Speaker, of this amount, Kenya shilling 47.7 billion will fund activities and programs for the attainment of universal health coverage. Mr. Speaker, specific allocations for the various activities and programs includes Kenya shilling 8.7 billion for the Kenya COVID-19 Emergency Response Project, Kenya shilling 4.1 billion for free maternity health care, Kenya shilling 7.2 billion for the managed equipment services.
In a move to enhance affordable medical and equipment for management of COVID-19 and other chronic diseases, the government has introduced tax relief measures on various pharmaceutical products and medical equipment.
I propose to introduce VAT exemption on medicaments used in our health facilities, including decongestants and food supplements. Further, I propose to provide VAT exemptions to diagnostic and laboratory reagents, artificial respirators, including therapeutic respiration apparatus, breathing appliances, gas masks, as well as medical equipment and technologies used in the provision of medical care services. It is my hope that the suppliers of this medicament and medical equipment will reciprocate by making their prices affordable.
The government has also set aside 1.2 billion shillings for recruitment of health workers, 7.2 billion shillings for the management of equipment services, and 1.8 billion shillings for medical cover for the elderly and people living with disability. Ben Chumba, reporting for Channel 1 News.
Well, those conducting businesses online will fall into the tax bracket in plans by the National Treasury to broaden the tax base. National Treasury CS Ukuriatani is seeking to amend the Finance Act of 2020 to have all those conducting online services and internet revenue generating activities to be taxed under the digital services tax.
Not targeted by the digital service tax should brace for tax liability in efforts by the National Treasury to expand the tax base. National Treasury CS Ukuriatani says the Finance Act 2020 only targets digital marketplace for taxation, missing out on other online businesses.
The Finance Act 2020 introduced the digital service tax on income earned through the digital marketplace. However, the current tax provision do not cover all traders who use the digital service platform to transact their business. In this regard, I propose to expand the scope of the digital service tax to include income derived from internet and electronic networks.
The National Treasury has also proposed a reintroduction of a 20% excess tax on betting amounts. Yatani says this is aimed at controlling betting that has become rampant in the society, contributing to vices.
I propose to reintroduce excess duty on betting at the rate of 20% of the amount wagered. Mr. Speaker, innovations in the tobacco industry has led to introduction of new products such as nicotine pouches. These new products do not fall in the classification of tobacco products existing in the Excise Duty Act and are therefore currently not subject to taxation. In this regard, I propose excise duty on products containing nicotine or nicotine substitutes at a specific rate of Shilling 5 per gram. This rate of excise duty is equivalent to the duty applicable to similar products under this Act.
He says the new nicotine products are not covered within the tobacco tax regime and make it hard for the taxman to collect revenue from such products. To this end, Yatani has proposed a 5 shilling per gram levy on products containing nicotine or nicotine substitutes.
Innovations in the tobacco industry has led to introduction of new products such as nicotine pouches. These new products do not fall in the classification of tobacco products existing in the Excise Duty Act and are therefore currently not subject to taxation. In this regard, I propose excise duty on products containing nicotine or nicotine substitutes at a specific rate of Shilling 5 per gram.
Consumers of imported vegetables will also pay more after the government introduced a 30% import duty on such foods. The tax is aimed at protecting local farm produce from competition from cheap imports. This will also see footwear raw material imports slapped with a 25% import tax in measures aimed at protecting the livestock sector.
To protect these farmers and the sector from cheap imports, the East African partner states agreed that vegetable products, including potatoes, peas, tomatoes, among others, shall attract a duty rate of 30% for 1 year as we await the finalization of the review of the East African Community Common External Tariff. And in order to enhance incomes of our farmers, the East African Community Partner States have agreed to retain the import duty on imported products for manufacture of leather and footwear products at 25% and introduce a further specific duty rate to guard against undervaluation.
Those in the extractive industry will pay a withholding tax on service fees. Benson Rioba reporting for Channel 1 Business.
Well, manufacturers have emerged as the biggest winners in this year's budget as the government sought to protect local manufacturers from cheap imports. National Treasury CS Ukuriatani has increased excise duty on imported finished iron and steel products to 25% and retained leather and footwear products import duty at 25%.
National Treasury Cabinet Secretary Ukur Yatani walked a tightrope while presenting the 3.66 trillion shillings budget for the 2021-2022 financial year. The biggest winners in the budget are local manufacturers after the CES increased excise duty on imported finished iron and steel products to 25%.
During the East African Community pre-budget meeting, the ministers noted with concern the proliferation of cheap imports into the region and agreed on measures to protect locally manufactured products from unfair competition. The agreed measures under customs shall become effective from 1st July 2021.
The Big Four agenda has also not been left out as it has been allocated 142.1 billion shillings. Out of this, food security will receive 54.2 billion shillings, universal health coverage 45.6 billion shillings, manufacturing 18.5 billion shillings, and affordable housing 14.9 billion shillings. Small businesses will also reap from this budget after Yatani earmarked 3.1 billion shillings to support micro, small and medium enterprises through affordable credits. To further promote local manufacturing of pharmaceutical products, the CES proposed to exempt VAT on inputs used in the manufacturing of medical ventilators and breathing appliances.
To sustain the fight against the COVID-19 pandemic, East African partner states have agreed to extend the duty-free importation window for raw materials and inputs for manufacture of masks, sanitizers, ventilators, and personal protective equipment remission for a further 1 year.
The extension of duty-free importation of inputs for manufacture of baby diapers for a further 1 year is expected to benefit new parents. Employers who employ at least 10 graduates from both universities and TVET institutions will be allowed to deduct from their taxable income 50% out of the cost of the apprentice emoluments.
The Treasury has allocated 62.2 billion shillings for free secondary education, which is part of the 202 billion shillings for the education sector for the year 2021-2022 fiscal calendar. The free primary education will receive 12 billion shillings, while the competency-based curriculum has been awarded 1 billion shillings.
Treasury Cabinet Secretary Ukur Yatani has announced that the government has allocated 2.5 billion shillings for the recruitment of teachers in this year's budget.
I have set aside a total of shilling 202.8 billion to support programs in the education sector. Mr. Speaker, out of the proposed allocation, shilling 12 billion will cater for free primary education, shilling 2.5 billion for recruitment of teachers, shilling 62.2 billion for free day secondary education, including insurance under the NHI for secondary school students.
The Treasury has also allocated 4 billion shillings for examination fee waivers for both primary and secondary schools to cushion vulnerable students. The government has also set aside 1.8 billion shillings for the school feeding program for the next 12 months.
Shilling 4 billion for examination fee waiver for all class 8 and Form 4 candidates, and shilling 1.8 billion for the school feeding program.
Furthermore, the Teacher Service Commission will receive 281.7 billion shillings, 73 billion shillings will be channeled to university education, and 5.8 billion shillings for secondary education quality improvement project. On improvement of school infrastructure, primary and secondary schools will receive 4.2 billion shillings, while technical training institutes and vocational training centers will get 1.8 billion shillings. For Channel 1 News, I'm Ben Troinjue.
So the government has earmarked 142 billion shillings to fund implementation of the Big Four agenda. Universal health coverage will receive the lion's share of 121 billion shillings to support the various programs aimed at improving health outcomes. Here is Suleiman Yeri with the details.
The Big Four agenda is anchored on the pillars of food security, manufacturing, universal health coverage, and affordable housing. This year, funding for the government's Big Four agenda projects has been increased to 142.1 billion shillings from 128.3 billion shillings allocated last year.
Continuous implementation of the Big Four agenda because the Big Four agenda was not a one-year event. It's a program that we have planned and budgeted over 3 years, over the medium term. And they are at the moment at the various levels, stages of implementation. And we are confident that by the end of this financial year, we'll have significantly completed most of them.
However, the current provision is a steep fall if compared with the 450.9 billion shillings allocated to the drivers and enablers of the development plan in 2019-2020. Treasury allocated 400 billion Kenya shillings to the plan in 2018-2019, which was the first budgetary allocation after being unveiled in 2017.
Maybe there's heavy budget allocation in the first financial year and then the subsequent years, because it also depends on the activities that are being undertaken. The fact that the allocation for this year is lower than the first year does not mean that we have abandoned the project. It's only that because these projects are at different phases of implementation. And we are happy with the progress and confident that most of them will be completed in good time.
Universal health coverage will get the lion's share of 121.1 billion shillings to support the various programs aimed at improving health outcomes.
To lower cases of HIV, AIDS, and malaria and tuberculosis in the country, shilling 5.8 billion has been set aside. To enhance vaccines and immunization program, we've set aside shilling 3.9 billion. Further, Mr. Speaker, we propose an additional shilling 14.3 billion for purchase of COVID-19 vaccines and related expenditure in the course of the financial 2021-2022.
Affordable housing programs has been allocated 13.9 billion shillings.
The proposed allocation includes shilling 3.5 billion to Kenya Mortgage Refinance Company for establishment of the company's capital, as well as for own lending to primary mortgage lenders. Shilling 8.2 billion for construction of affordable housing units, as well as shilling 500 million for construction of social housing units.
The manufacturing pillar was earmarked 20.5 billion shillings.
Out of these, shilling 2 billion will go to the credit guarantee scheme to enhance access to affordable credit by micro, small, and medium enterprises in the manufacturing sector. Shilling 500 million will support development of various micro, small, and medium enterprises in Kenya. And shilling 600 million for provision of finances to micro, small, and medium enterprises through the Kenya Industrial Estate.
To support the government's target of attaining 100% food and nutrition security, Yatani earmarked 60 billion shillings in this year's budget.
Out of these, shilling 7 billion will go to the National Agricultural and Rural Inclusivity Project, shilling 2.7 billion for the Kenya Cereal Enhancement Program. Shilling 1.8 billion has been proposed for the Emergency Locust Response. Shilling 1.5 billion for the National Value Chain Support Program. Shilling 1.5 billion for the Agricultural Sector Development Support Program 2.
He earmarked 3 billion shillings for free disease holding ground in Lamu in efforts aimed at improving livestock production. Suleiman Yeri, Channel 1 News.
Well, the Treasury building was today resplendent with decor to match the auspicious occasion of the presentation of the 2021-2022 budget. The fanfare was, however, tampered with the tight security offered to the Treasury Cabinet Secretary Ukur Yatani as his motorcade snaked its way to Parliament buildings. Channel 1's Irene Muchuma Odem captured the light moment of Budget Day.
Treasury's 15-story high-rise Thursday was perhaps the most decorated building in Nairobi's central business district. Flower pots, Kenyan flags, and well-rolled-out red carpets painted elegant images from Treasury building and its environs. A section of Kenyans making their way to witness the country's yet another historic moment, while others followed the events from screens. And when the moment for the iconic briefcase came, journalists did not take chances in having the best shots as the Treasury Cabinet Secretary stepped out, hoisting it.
No matter who you are, you can go the whole world over. Every city has its dawn.
This was followed by a grandeur drive to Parliament buildings flanked by a heavy security retinue. It was, however, momentous occasion when he arrived at Parliament to a warm welcome by members of the Finance and National Planning Committee. Irene Michuma Odim, Channel 1.
Was such a colourful day there. Well, National Treasury CS Ukuriatani's 3.63 trillion shillings budget was greeted by mixed reactions from elected leaders, while the leader of majority in the National Assembly, Amos Kimunya, hailed Yatani for maintaining a good balance between economic recovery and social programs. Some legislators criticized the National CS.
There are some things that need to be finished and finalized before he can hand over, power, and especially the Agenda 4 items, and which have received some funding. So it's quite a tight thing, but by and large, I'm happy with the way the Treasury has managed to, and CS Yatani has managed to balance the various competing forces.
Kitu muhimu mimi nikiwa mbunge wa Jomvu ambao kimenifurahisha ni ile kuongeza pesa zaidi kwa vijana kazi mtaani, ambapo vijana kazi mtaani ni kazi 10,000 ambazo zitaweza kunufaisha vijana wetu hapa nchini.
90% of the young people in Matungu depend on boda or motorbike for their incomes. So if it actually increases in terms of the purchasing price and the taxes has increased, then actually we are disadvantaging very many youth who otherwise have gotten employment through that kind of system where they buy a motorbike and use the motorbike for transport system.
But I've listened keenly to what the minister has to say about the budget, and of course there are many areas of concern, and as a country there are some things he's pointed out which I think will make a difference. The things we are not comfortable with, and most of those that we are not comfortable with, we'll be able to address them through the finance bill, which is coming in next week in Parliament, because that's where we get to know how he's planning to raise the kind of money he's planning to raise.
Well, Kenyans are calling on the various agencies allocated resources meant for the welfare of citizens to ensure the funds reach the people that need it the most. A cross-section interviewed by KBC Channel 1 in various parts of the country said they are especially happy with the continuation of youth empowerment programs such as Kazi Mtaani that was allocated 3 billion shillings to help uplift the youth from economic hardships.
Namna nimeangalia hii maneno ya budget nimesoma leo ni kwamba hiyo imekuwa nzuri sana, hasa kwa sisi vijana, imeegemea upande wetu. Sasa mimi kama kijana nasema hiyo pesa yenye imeongezwa juu kwa kasi kwa vijana, hiyo kasi ya mtaani.
Tumefurahia na hiyo budget ya pesa ya corona. Tunaomba wanunulie wa Kenya kama wote, si kama wote, at least sisi tujifeel tuko Kenya. Juu sisi ni wa Kenya, tunapenda Kenya. Leo dawa itaponya Kenya. Na tuvae mask na keep distance.
Kuhusiana na hii budget ambayo imesomwa, kuna mambo nakubaliana nayo, na kuna pia venye naona hii budget hii mwaka imekuwa mingi sana, itaumiza Wakenya wengi sana, especially vijana kama sisi wenye bado tunang'ang'ana kuweka chakula kwa meza.
So mtukufu rais, wewe ndio kiongozi wetu. Tuna insist hiyo kwa sababu hatuna mali nyingine ya kukimbilia kama wananchi.
Kama kazi, tunashukuru kwa hii kazi mtaani kwa vile imeweza kutusaidia hii pesa. Tumekuwa na machama, tunaendelea vizuri.
Hawakuchanja watu wote. Tena leo tunasomewa eti wameongeza pesa kwa COVID. Hizi pesa ndio zingeenda kwa education sector.
Kulingana na mimi naweza sema kwamba bajeti vile inavyoendelea ndio nchi nayo inaenda ikiinuka. Endapo tuko na janga la COVID, hiyo naye pia imetufinya.
Elsewhere, the government has increased its budgetary allocation to the Ministry of Sport, Culture and Heritage by 1 billion shillings in the 2022 fiscal year as the country steps up preparations for the state to stage the World Under-20 Athletics Championships in Nairobi in August this year. The government budget that was presented today in Parliament by Treasury CS Ukur Yatani, the ministry has been allocated 15 billion shillings, up from 14 billion shillings that was allocated in the fiscal year 2020-2021.
This year's budget for Ministry of Sports has been increased from 14 billion shillings to 15 billion shillings. 90 million shillings has been allocated for the refurbishment of regional stadia that the government had initiated in the last 5 years.
Culture and arts sectors. To support recovery of these sectors, I have proposed an allocation of shilling 15 billion for the Sports, Arts and Social Development Fund, shilling 1.7 billion for the Tourism Fund, shilling 643 million for the Tourism Promotion Fund, and shilling 90 million for refurbishment of the regional stadia.
The Ministry of Sports will also use the funds to prepare national teams that will feature in the Tokyo Olympic Games and the Paralympic Games. The funds will also be used to prepare athletes who will represent the country in the World Under-20 Championship that Kenya will be hosting this August at Kasarani Stadium. Frederick Mwoki for Channel 1. Frederick Mwoki for Channel 1 Sports.
As has been the tradition since the coming into force of the East African Community Treaty, other member states simultaneously presented their budgets on Thursday, while Kenya's budget was the highest at 3.66 trillion shillings. Tanzania had a budget of 1.7 trillion shillings, while Uganda presented a budget worth 1.37 trillion shillings. Here are the highlights of budgets of other East African member states.
Tanzania, which is the second largest economy in East African Community after Kenya, had its budget read by the new Minister of Finance and Planning, Dr. Mwigulu Nchemba. Tanzania's budget increased by 54 billion, 1.7 trillion Kenyan shillings to 1.7 trillion Kenyan shillings for the 2021-2022 financial year. Tanzania says this will be the first budget for the implementation of the 5-year Development Plan 3. Tanzania plans to spend an equivalent of about 500 billion Kenyan shillings on servicing the national debt and other relevant services. Of this, Tanzania plans to spend an equivalent of 590 billion Kenyan shillings on development projects. The country plans to raise an equivalent 450 billion Kenyan shillings locally, mainly from taxes. Will be ready. In Uganda, designated Minister of State for Finance and Planning Amos Lugoboli, while presenting the 1.37 trillion Kenyan shillings budget, announced the scrapping of the controversial social media tax. Lugoboli repealed the 200 Uganda shillings exercise duty imposed on the use of social media. In its place, Uganda has instead introduced a direct tax of 12% on airtime and mobile internet data. While introducing the social media tax in July 2018, Uganda said it will help increase domestic budget financing instead of depending on foreign aid, which was becoming expensive. Uganda plans to raise about 1 trillion Kenyan shillings as domestic revenue and plans to get about 133 billion shillings from domestic borrowing. Uganda expects to secure 312 billion Kenyan shillings in external financing for projects. Overall, Uganda plans to have its budget financed by domestic revenue, 76.7% and 23.3% of external revenue.
You're watching us live from Broadcasting House. Our second break is coming up next, and thereafter we'll continue with more stories.
Kupata skiza tune hii, Ufunuo wa Yohana 38 dial *811 *817 hash.
Wakati mwingi katika maisha binadamu hujipata kwa shida, unapata ya kwamba hauna usaidizi unaohitaji, biashara zinaisha, hakuna mapato ya kila siku. Lakini hata kwa hayo yote, Biblia inasema ya kwamba katika kitabu cha Ufunuo wa Yohana mlango wa 3 mstari wa 8, na yajua matendo yako. Tazama, nimekupa mlango uliofunguliwa mbele yako.
Ili kupata skiza tune hiyo ya Yohana 38 dial star 811 star 817 hash. Dial star 811 star 817 hash.
Bwana Motiso, pikipiki yako ndio hii. Uko shwani yangu. Hii pikipiki ni unakumbuka uniekelea the lowest unique bid yako ilikuwa ngapi? 18 shillings. Na unajua kuendesha hii gari? Kidogo. Haya, kitoko yako shika helmet, kifungu yako chomoka na mali yako.
Kujiunga na QuickBid ni rahisi. Enda kwenye M-Pesa, bonyeza paybill kisha weka business number 4032353. Kwenye account weka kodi ya bidhaa unayotaka na bid yako ya chini zaidi. Kwa mfano TV 16. Kisha weka shilingi 20 tu kama idadi yako. Weka bid yako pia kwenye www.quickbid.co.ke. Kumbuka, bid ya chini zaidi ya kipekee ndio ununua. QuickBid, bidhaa bora kwa bei ya chini.
Kisii, Changamkeni, and let's meet at Gusii Stadium from Wednesday 9th June to Friday 11th June for the IRA Open Day. The Insurance Regulatory Authority is bringing the insurance message right to your doorstep in partnership with the County Government of Kisii. Join us to learn more about insurance. IRA officers will be on site to address your needs, queries, and complaints. Various companies will also be present to showcase their products and address any concerns you may have. Policyholders, beneficiaries, and members of the public are all invited to attend. Entry is absolutely free. All Ministry of Health and COVID-19 protocols and guidelines will be adhered to. IRA, promoting insurance, protecting the insured.
The greatest rally in the world is back in Kenya. Catch all the action of WRC Safari Rally live and exclusive on KBC Channel 1 from 24th to 27th June. See the world's best drivers navigate their machines on Kenya's rough terrain at breakneck speeds. Experience the thrills, adrenaline, drama, and excitement as man and machine do battle. Don't miss out. WRC Safari Rally, live and exclusive on KBC Channel 1, your true sports partner.
Welcome back. And now away from the issues around budget to politics now, where former Wajir Governor Mohamed Abdi has threatened to seek a further legal redress if Wednesday's High Court order restating him as Wajir Governor is not honoured. He expressed his disappointment over the persistent defiance of court orders, saying it undermines the rule of law. Elsewhere, Chama ya Mapatano Kenya has urged the president to review the reason why he declined to appoint the 6 judges for the benefit of the public.
Anti-riot police officers barricaded the entrance of Delta House, which hosts the Council of Governors' offices, blocking the former Wajir Governor Mohamed Abdi from accessing the building. Addressing the media at a different location, the former governor expressed his commitment to unify the people of Wajir after the Meru High Court stayed the orders on his removal and reinstated him as governor until the case is heard and determined.
The 3-judge bench which sat in Meru High Court yesterday, and it said that I shall continue to be in office to execute the powers and functions of the governor of Wajir County as prescribed by the law until the petition is heard and determined.
He expressed his displeasure with what he termed as the persistent defiance of court orders by his successor given in his favor, saying he will seek further redress if the dispute is not resolved.
If this court order, now this is the 4th or 3rd time, is not obeyed, then definitely we will again go to court and have those people arrested, because the Constitution and our laws are very clear. Nobody can, just disobey a court order.
Meanwhile, Chama ya Mapatano Kenya leader Damaris Too has defended the president's decision in not appointing 6 judges, but urged him to reveal the reason in the interest of the public.
He's the head of the state, so I'm sure by the time he's coming into a conclusion that these 6 judges are not fit to sit in these places. He has a reason, and we wait to hear his reasons. However, if he doesn't give us the reasons, we'll hope, I know it has gone to court, and we hope a good process will take place, and we will get to know why the president has not appointed the 6 judges. But we will urge him that if not for any other reason, he appoints the 6 judges.
Speaking during the launch of the party tour, lauded the handshake between President Uhuru Kenyatta and opposition leader Raila Odinga, saying it has brought political and economical stability in the country.
We also urge the president to form a good peace enrollment with the others, so that we have everybody on board. As we said, ni kupatana. So we have everybody on board. Wapatane, wasikizane, waongeleshane, ili wajue kama watasaidiana. BBI is about building bridges initiative. So for us, it's to ask the president and anybody else who is opposing to come together, wapatane, wasikizane na waelewane.
Suleiman Yeri, Channel 1 News.
Well, Kenya on Thursday confirmed 624 positive coronavirus cases from a sample size of 6,728 tested in the last 24 hours. Kisumu had the second highest cases after Nairobi. Meanwhile, the US government plans to donate 500 million Pfizer coronavirus vaccines, doses for nearly 100 poor countries over the next 2 years. The Biden administration is likely to distribute 200 million shots this year and another 300 million in the first half of next year to 92 lower-income countries.
Thursday, Kenya recorded 624 positive cases from a sample size of 6,728 tested in the last 24 hours. This represents a positivity rate of 9.3%, which is a slight drop from 11.8% positivity rate recorded on Wednesday. Of the confirmed cases, Nairobi had 152 cases and Kisumu had 70 new cases. The number of patients that have recovered from the disease stands at 313. The country has sadly lost 17 patients to the disease, pushing the total cumulative death toll to 3,362. The number of those vaccinated so far across the country stands at 1,059,117. Meanwhile, U.S. President Joe Biden plans to buy and donate 500 million doses of the Pfizer coronavirus vaccine to more than 90 countries. He called on the world's democracies to do their part to help end the deadly pandemic. The announcement of the vaccine donation, the largest ever by a single country, comes ahead of Biden's meeting with the leaders of the other group of 7 advanced economies. U.S. drug maker Pfizer and its German partner BioNTech confirmed they will provide 200 million doses in 2021 and 300 million doses in the first half of 2022, which the United States will then distribute to 90 lower-income countries and the African Union. Ruth Wamboi for Channel 1 News.
To the counties now, where the Kenya National Chamber of Commerce and Industry has rolled out a program to support small and micro enterprises that have been adversely affected by COVID-19 pandemic in the country. The Chamber's National President, Richard Ngatia, says the program, with the support of MasterCard Foundation, plans to advance loans of up to 30,000 shillings to small businesses.
Kenya National Chamber of Commerce and Industry National President Richard Ngatia was in Malindi for the opening of KNCCI county offices. It is here that he said that with the support of the MasterCard Foundation, the Chamber has secured funds to advance small businesses.
Tumezungumza na serikali kuu, tumezungumza na Council of Governors vile tutaweza kusaidia watu ya biashara, hawa ni hao tunaita MSMEs, na ndio tuweze kuona vile wanaweza pata loni, vile wanaweza pata hela, vile wanaweza pia hata kusaidiwa na wasomeshwe vile wanaweza kuendelea na mabiashara zao.
In Nakuru County, the county government is partnering with the national government and development partners to economically empower communities at Salga as a way of addressing social challenges faced by long-distance truck drivers who ply the Kisumu-Eldoret highway.
I believe we shall offer a viable alternative
And that is why it is important to know that the other components of this particular program is economic empowerment.
In Meru, a majority of the elected and opinion leaders from Imenti South constituency want delimitation of the new sub-county given by the national government to be based on population and the economic activities.
Viongozi wamekubaliana Imenti South itagawa mara mbili ikikuwa 3-3, that is Imenti East and Imenti West. Hiyo ni kumaanisha Nkwene, Abogeta West na Igoji West itakuwa sub-county moja inaitwa Imenti West.
In Siaya, the county government has collaborated with the national government and other stakeholders to come up with agricultural aid programs for farmers in the area.
This project focus is on increasing agricultural productivity, enhancing resilience to impact of climate change and reduction in greenhouse gases emissions.
Meanwhile, Coast Regional Commissioner John Elungata has directed chiefs and their assistants to carry out their duties without discriminating against communities living in Tana River County.
Chief, kama wewe unajua katika eneo lako una Waorma, una Wardei, una Wailwana, una Wata, una Pokomo, mbona usiwatumikie wote kwa usawa?
Finally, in Kiambu County, a somber mood engulfed Limuru after a body of a middle-aged man was found lying lifeless in his place of work as a watchman. Neighbors suspect he died from carbon monoxide gas inhaled from a jiko he was using.
Venye tu alilala ile masali jiwekelea kidogo, hiyo ndio masali yaga. So haijabainika ni baridi, ni jiko, lakini hakuwa na sign ya ugonjwa ati kuna ugonjwa imemuua.
Ruth Famboy for Channel 1 News.
On to sports now, where Waita Nzioka is on a mission to finish this month's WRC Safari Rally, despite being in the top 10 positions during the 2014 and 2015 seasons. Waita had problems with his vehicle during those two events, losing ground to his rivals, and he went to make amends at the Safari Rally, the world event to be held from the 24th to the 27th of this month and will be televised live on KBC Channel 1.
Waita Nzioka, navigated by Tuta Mionki, held an afternoon training session today at the hills of the Lukenya Academy, just 14 days before the start of the WRC Safari Rally. This was their final training session as they eagerly await to compete in the world event to be held from the 24th to 27th of this month.
We did set some pretty quick times in the ARC, and we hope now that we're sort of in a better mental space in terms of the limits of the car, I think we hope we'll set some very competitive times. And as I said, if we get to the wolf stage, we will give it our everything.
The route also used at the Equator Rally is one that is promising to the driver who has been involved in rallying for nearly 25 years.
I just have to take my hat off to the team that has designed the route, because they've managed to get a good mix of technically very difficult stages. But all I can say is that the route is fantastic. They've done a great job of compacting the event into a very condensed area within Nakuru and Naivasha.
In his Evolution R4, racing for Team Kenya Mbele, Nzioka is optimistic that he will finish the event, especially if the dry weather mark the 4 days of the Safari Rally.
We want it to be hot, and we expect that the weather will be punishing. So for us, we can endure. So we are training to be in that endurance. We're training to be in the heat. We're training to go long hours, pushing ourselves. And we've been training our tire changes in off the car. And working just basically on fitness.
It's very interesting because the terrain is quite different, but we have what we call the navigator sections, a lot of the very tight and twisty. Your notes really have to be on point, but it all starts with recce. If you do a good recce, get your notes correctly, then reading back the notes, you've already done, if you ask me, 90% of the work during recce.
And with the experience gained in his 25-year involvement in rallying, he wants to pass on the baton to much younger drivers, among them Jeremy Wahome. 22-year-old Jeremy Wahome, a degree graduate in finance and economics, will also be graduating from the Formula 3 to make his debut in the WRC Safari Rally this year.
When it comes to motorsport, you're using the skills you have in your footwork application, your steering wheel. There's various techniques you use. So I'm hoping that I can carry what I learned in Formula 3 and Formula 4 and now transfer it to rallying. Because it's the same concept, you're just now manipulating the car in a different way. In Formula 3, you don't slide the car, but in rallying, you have to slide the car to get it rotated.
Despite having not felt the route before, Jeremy is optimistic that he will make his presence felt at the event in his car number 64.
It's a very long rally. In total, between the transport and competition stages, it will be 1,000 kilometers. So over the 3 days, the first and the most important thing is to say that I've finished and I've completed my first safari rally. But on top of that, I also don't want to drive pedestrian just to get to the finish line. So hopefully, from my experience, I'll be able to gauge just how much I can push myself and how early I can start to make strides. And hopefully, by the end of the rally, I'll have moved up from my seeding, because I think I'm starting 53rd.
He has been keeping fit at his home, anxiously waiting to test his ability on the terrains of Naivasha. The WRC Safari Rally will be televised live on KBC Channel 1.
The president is extremely encouraging. I think for him, the bigger vision was to get the event back. And he's lent his support even when time has been extremely tight. Honorable Amina Mohammed and I managed to convince him to come to Soisambu during the ARC event in between two official functions, and he managed to stop by and have a look. And I think that gave all the volunteers, because this is a sport that relies so heavily on volunteers, all those marshals and young boys and girls out in the field providing for our safety and event certainty. I think we're all very motivated to see the president there. And you can be sure you'll see him in the WRC.
Barclay Feather, Channel 1 Sports.
Well, let me ask you this. When was the last time you sent or received a letter? Yeah, I know, it's quite a long time. Look, the Postal Corporation of Kenya is on a mission to revive the culture of sending letters, which somehow has been declining the world over. And the question is, will they succeed in this mission? They're not just urging people to send letters, they're as well telling them to combine technology in their business. Well, that's our discussion tonight on Inside Government. I had a chat with the Postmaster General, Dan Kagwe, and I posed to him this question: what is the future of Postal Corporation of Kenya? He gave me a very interesting answer. You cannot wait to listen to that. Thank you very much for finding time to be with us tonight on Inside Government. Not Inside Government, but Business Insights. Inside Government is coming up next, right here on KBC Channel 1. O'Brien Kimani is my name. Thank you on behalf of the entire team. Good night.
Vera Beauty College.
Vera Beauty and Fashion College, with branches in Nairobi, Eldoret, Thika, and Meru. Did you know that we are a TVET-approved institution? We offer courses in fashion design, interior design in soft furnishing, event decoration, flower arrangement, event planning, hairdressing, barbering and dreadlocks, beauty therapy, makeup, nail technology, spa massages, teaching skills, TOT, solo business management, and many more. Register now and visit our website on www.verabeautycollege.com. You can also call on 0725 923 550 Nairobi branch, 0728 087 689 Eldoret branch, 0722 227428 Thika branch, 0725 000 706 Meru branch. Vera Beauty and Fashion College, a TVET approved institution.
Jumapili hii kwenye runinga ya KBC, ungana naye Askofu Michael Wanderi wa kanisa la Christian Foundation Fellowship Kiambu kuanzia saa 1 hadi saa 2 asubuhi.
Ningetaka nikwambie, our Jehovah God, because the Bible says he is the same yesterday, today and forevermore. He is able to take you to a place of abundance. He is able to take you to Rehoboth in the name of Jesus Christ.
Kipindi ni neno la neema, ukiletewa naye Askofu Michael Wanderi wa kanisa la Christian Foundation Fellowship Kiambu. Usikose.
This weekend on KBC Channel 1.
AJ dreaded going to school, not because he didn't like learning, but because he didn't have any friends.
I love playing soccer, but they'd make fun of me of every single little thing, and I'd feel really, really sad.